At 9:33, we break all the rules. This is News Radio WRVA.
All right, thanks for joining us, everybody. 9:03 here on Richmond's Morning News, News Radio WRVA. My name is Rich Herrera, Super Dave, Gary Hess, and, of course, we continue our conversation with our former governor, former attorney general, U.S. ambassador, Jim Gilmore. Joins us on the program every Thursday. Sir, let's continue our conversation. Yesterday, I had on someone from Chesterfield County, one of the administrators. They were talking about the 1% sales tax that 20 municipalities will have on the ballot coming up this November. We talked about it in particular fashion and kind of drilled down a little bit in Chesterfield County. We also see Chesterfield County talking about, well, maybe if we can get data centers taxes and ramp those up, we can get rid of the hated car tax. Tell me, sir, what are your thoughts when you see all of these counties and cities wanting to see a 1% sales tax increase?
Well, look, I'm against that kind of thing, frankly. But the bigger picture is this. I actually ran on the reducing the car tax way back in 1997 when I was running for governor, and implemented a program when I became governor in 1998 to actually get rid of it. And after 4 years, I had gotten 70% off and left a plan for the next administration to completely eliminate the car tax, which was not implemented. And instead, a remnant of it hung around. And now, after all these years, of course, it grows and grows. And I'm amused in a way because now, after all this time, the car tax remains a key issue. Now, look, you can always say that we need to raise taxes for doing more things. I report to your listeners that there is no limit to the amount of money that government wants to get in order to do more things. And in those days, it was roads, and then it became schools, and it's still schools. And schools are a good thing to spend money on. Roads are a good thing to spend money on. But the key is that, let me say this. I think we're inching into what should have been done 25 years ago, which is that the legislature should have, in the second term of the governor's administration, which I never got because of our one-term governorship, you should go into a tax reform. And that's actually what we're doing. The localities at this point, not the state government, not the General Assembly, the localities are inching into a tax reform. They're beginning to ask the question, well, what are we're going to raise a 1% tax here. What are we going to do with the money? Well, we're going to remove the car tax after all these years. Oh, no, we're going to use it for schools. We're beginning to see the discussion about a tax reform growing up from the localities in order to try to address these issues, including the car tax. So I'm kind of amused by it because after all these years, we're finally beginning to get around to doing what we should have done a long time ago, which is completely eliminate the car tax. One more thing. I know how to do that. I ain't talking. I ain't going to tell anybody how to do it, but I know how to do it. And it should be done.
Okay.
The car tax should be eliminated completely, and some of this reassessment of money at the local level ought to finish up this car tax once and for all.
Okay, I have a question for you. Because I think this is kind of the jab that I always hear when Governor Spanberger and Louise Lucas and Don Scott were arguing over the budget. It always starts with this, sir. We need to raise more money for schools. And we're seeing that in Chesterfield County. We see this in Richmond. Everybody wants to spend more money on schools. And if I don't say yes to spend money on schools, well, Rich Herrera, you're an awful person. Why is it that everybody always leads whenever they want to take more money out of my pocket? Milton Friedman said the difference between big business and big government is big business, I get to choose whether I spend my money. Big government means they take it forcibly out of my pocket. Everybody wants to use schools as a reason to raise my taxes. But I'm telling you, sir, sometimes I think it's a feint. Sometimes I think they say that in order to get people to not say no, and then it's just raising taxes, raising taxes, raising taxes.
Well, that's right, Rich. And look, let's be clear. Schools are a good thing to spend money on. But the interesting question is if right now we have to do trade-offs and we have to, instead of reducing taxes on the car tax or doing other things, while we're raising money at the local level for schools, what's wrong with our schools? After all these years of trying to throw money into the schools, are we still not happy with the schools? It seems to me that that's a real problem. But we're beginning to inch our way into a serious discussion, not led at the state level, not led by Governor Spanberger or Louise Lucas, but being addressed in a reform capacity from the localities. They're the ones that are this 1%, sales tax for schools. Okay, that's great. And, I guess I'd like to see some report as to what's wrong with our schools that requires that immediate infusion of money. And if that's the case, then we ought to be reorienting our money at the state and local level to pay for schools.
Okay, so here's the other part. People have asked me this over the last few days. What happened to all the lottery money? When the lottery came in, that was supposed to help all of our schools and take care of everything. And sir, here's what I see. The scam of all of this, when you get to the politicians in Capitol Square, yes, I got all this lottery money, and then I could take that money that I would have spent that the lottery has up there. It's not a plus. I can now divert that money somewhere else because the lottery's in there, and I could use that to fund my schools instead of having the lottery plus up what I had to take care of all of this.
Rich, when I was governor, the lottery was just being thrown into the general budget for whatever the legislature wanted to spend money on, the governor wanted to put in their budget. When I was governor, I dedicated the lottery proceeds to schools. And I think it remains to be the case today that the lottery profits go to the schools. That was not the case when I became governor. It was the case when I left the governor.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but what did they want to use the lottery money for? Just general funding?
Yeah, previous to me, yes. They wanted to just throw the money into the budget. And I basically said, no, we're going to pass a law and earmark it for schools. Because at that point, people were screaming about schools, and it was making it harder and harder for me to phase out the car tax. So we said, okay, we'll put the lottery money into schools, and then we'll continue this phase out of the car tax. Now, of course, after I left, the Warner administration and his allies in the state Senate refused to phase out
Republicans
the car
and
tax.
Democrats, by the way, not the Republicans that went back on that as well. Sir, I got to ask you,
especially the Republicans.
Yeah, I got to ask you this part right here. I've talked a lot about data centers. I think there's some misinformation. I think there's some people that are jumping. I think there's people that are confused, and I think there's a lot of people that are still trying to find all this data center stuff. My point has been, for the data centers, we give them a $2 billion tax break on sales taxes here in the Commonwealth. That was one of the agreements we had. They generate $5.7 billion. We give them a $2 billion break. They generate $5.7 billion in local and in state revenue for this Commonwealth. If I have that kind of money coming in, why is it North Carolina is about to get rid of their income tax? Why is it Florida doesn't have a state income tax? Why is it that Virginia, instead of going the other way where we're attracting people and making our lives easier, it seems like we got people that want to keep raising our taxes?
Well, that's right. I mean, look, and that's a difference theoretically between the two parties anyway. I'm not sure I see a great leadership out of the Republicans on tax policy at this point after all these years. But the Democrats are relentless that you keep on raising taxes because they can do more things with the money. But, at the end of the day, I think that getting rid of the car tax once and for all, as I was trying to do, and once again, I'm opposed to this one-term governorship. It was very difficult to phase it out within 1 4-year term, and when a remnant was left over, now it's been ballooning up, and that's why it's suddenly a topic again. And by the way, we haven't, you and I talked this morning about data centers. You're raising that topic right now.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we're giving tax breaks so that people with data centers will come here and spend their capital and create opportunities and jobs and local revenue again. And, that's a good thing. Now, on the other hand, I'm listening to the localities, and what they're saying is we don't want these things in our neighborhood making all this noise and all this stuff and raising electrical rates. I think we can raise the issue of making sure that people in their homes don't increase their electricity costs. And that, of course, goes into the question of this new merger that's underway. And I've had some conversations with people at Dominion. Dominion is very central to the life of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So basically, I called for a pause to make sure that we had time to fully consider it. The State Corporation Commission says, no, we can do it within the time limits we've got. But I'm not seeing a lot of
which scares me a little bit. Okay, so let me ask you this, because we got about a minute here. am I asking too much? I'm looking for some leadership out of the governor's mansion, out of the General Assembly. I agree. And I think everybody that has concerns about data centers coming into their community, I don't want it next to my house. I don't want it next to my schools. There's places you could put it. The president has said, you want a data center? Good. Build your own power plant next to it so you're not overtaxing the regular commercial and residential. There's lots of things we could do. I'm just looking for some leadership. If we're supposed to be the internet capital of the world, where is the leadership? Where's the Manhattan Project to make sure that we can have something that is a very vital part of this Commonwealth economy?
Well, we're not seeing at this point a plan out of the governor's mansion. We're not seeing an overall way of looking at this out of the governor's mansion. And as for the legislature, Louise Lucas is running that, and she's basically saying, okay, I'm not going to give these tax breaks to data centers, which of course encourages them to come in the first place. I'm going to redirect that money elsewhere. I think she said for either roads or schools, same old thing.
Same thing. So, but it turned out, sir, it turned out the money that she took, she's using it for ACA, temporary COVID subsidies, and then they're going to use it for a bunch of other things to fight Donald Trump. That whole thing was a scam.
Yeah, the whole thing. And actually, there are two more people involved in this argument. One is the localities, as I've been saying this morning. They're actually sort of leading in this by trying to actually address the issues. Now, the localities first started off saying, well, we like data centers because it gives us more money, more revenue. Then all of a sudden, the communities blew up and said, we don't want these things. And so that argument is now going forward, but it isn't going forward at the state level, and certainly not the national level. It's going forward at the local level. It ain't all bad, by the way, Rich. Sometimes, the right political answers come out of the neighborhoods and the communities and the boards of supervisors.
100%. In fact, I have this idea, sir. I want to see what you think. I think it's time I get out on the road, and my producer, Super Dave, is going to yell at me for this, but we kind of came up with this yesterday. I think I should go visit all of the counties in our listening area and invite some of those county administrators and supervisors and just get their view, because I think they're some of the biggest leaders on some of these things that I'm not seeing coming out of the governor's mansion or the General Assembly.
Well, you've got a voice here on WRVA, and you're using it. So there's nothing wrong with that. You're actually adding to the community argument and discussion that's going on. I'm doing that with you right now. So, public communication is a good thing. And if you go out there and kind of encourage it, your listeners are going to get a better idea about what the pressures are that I'm trying to address this morning.
I think we're going to do it. Sir, as always, it's a pleasure. God bless you. I love you so much for doing this. I appreciate you more than you'll ever know. And I can't wait to talk to you next week.
We're back to the foreign policy next week. Looking forward to talking to you.
Thank you, sir. Governor Jim Gilmore joining us here on News Radio WRVA. Let me remind everybody, our show today is brought to you by A+ Roofing. So, there's lots of people that want to reshingle your house. But there's only one that's reminding you, you gotta lock in that price right now, because the cost